The seat or throne of Isis is the Philosopher's Stone and Masonic building block with precise measurements. In masonry and architecture based upon sacred geometry, masculine lines and squares define the physical structures, but the measurements of those lines and squares are always formulated by feminine circles and ovals. Therefore, the operating principle in the creation of sacred works is the feminine inspiring the masculine, and the masculine seeking and honoring the feminine. 2 is division, the first separation of unity seeking to manifest itself in the multiplicity of all possibilities. 11 can be conceived as a physical representation of 2, in the form of pillars marking gateways. This depiction is the mathematical figure of pi, and in ancient dolmens. It can also be seen in the Japanese torii, a traditional gate of Shinto shrines, which marks the transition point from the profane to the sacred, and conveys the divine infinity beginning with 2 and never ending in pi. 2 and 11 are symbolically equal. Crowley, who called 11 the number of magical increase, gives us the formula of 2 equals 0, which can be seen as -1 plus +1 equals 0. This can also be seen as another perspective of Einstein's formula, E equals mc squared, as matter plus antimatter equals energy. In terms of tarot, 0 is the Fool, and the Fool is energy moving into the division of the Priestess. The first division gives the number 2. The second and third divisions of those 2 give us 4. The fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh division of those 4 give us 8. Therefore, 8 is arrived upon by 7 divisions. The final 7th note of a musical octave reaches toward an 8th, which is the first note of the next octave, bringing harmony between 1 and 8, and demonstrating through sound that the octave is the musical equivalent of a circle. There are 78 cards in tarot. The 7th major is the Chariot, associated with Cancer and ruled by the moon, and the 8th major is Strength, associated with Leo and ruled by the sun. In the number 78, the sun unites with the moon, and harmony is established. From division comes reunification. This movement toward the number 8 from the number 2 of the Priestess must be established to proceed. Now, about the numbers of the goddess herself, 8, 18, 81, 1080, and 1800, and their relationship with the number of the Hierophant, 5. Let it be remembered that the Priestess is the goddess, and the goddess is the holy temple. Let it also be remembered that the Hierophant teaches the mysteries of the goddess to the general public in a way that is safest for mass consumption without profaning the mysteries, and also that the Hierophant is thoroughly connected with Taurus and therefore ruled by Venus. We begin our study with the orbit of the planet Venus.
Only one planet forms a precise and regular geometric pattern in the sky, and that planet is Venus, the heavenly representation of the earthly Mary Magdalene. And the pattern she draws, as regularly as clockwork every 8 years, is a pentacle. As above, so below. Venus, the Magdalene. each pentacle precise, known, yet hidden. In that majestic symbol in the sky, harmonious, unchanging, regular as a metronome, was the music of the spheres. Shape, I am told, has a property. In other words, certain shapes do certain things. Can a pentacle really do something?
The movement just described represents 2 complete revolutions of a circle in 8 years. In 1 year, the distance traveled is 2,160 divided by 8, which is 270. And 270 signifies the period of pregnancy. In other words, 9 months of 30 days. The number 2,160 is significant here since the precession of the equinoxes is divided into 12 periods, each of which are 2,160 years. And so we see pregnancy and the movement of human cycles in relation to that of the celestial spheres and astrological ages. 2,160 is the number of equinoctial precession and the diameter of the moon as measured in miles. 2,160 divided by 2, the number of the priestess, equals 1,080. This number, 1,080, is the sum of the interior angles of an octagon. In this respect, 1,080 is equivalent to 8. The number of Isis is 8, and her active principle is 18. Bear in mind that the tarot's card number 18 is the moon. 8 can be seen in the shell diagram of the Fibonacci sequence as the portion with a wider arc than all the previous numbers, encompassing and embracing them. Being that there are 21 numbered cards in the tarot's major arcana, it is significant to note that the 8th number of the Fibonacci sequence is 21, and 8 is a thoroughly harmonious number. 1,800 divided by 5 equals 360, a number shown in the measurement of the inner units of Stonehenge. The circumference of a perfect circle has a radius of 180 degrees. Of the pentacle, the star points of its pentagram are formed with an angle of 36 degrees, and the full circle is 360 degrees. Lines drawn from the center to the star points bisect the angles, thereby forming angles of 18 degrees. The complete list of angles is 18 degrees, 36 degrees, 72 degrees. Multiply each by 5 and we get 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 360 degrees, or the right angle, the straight line, and the circle. The sum of the numbers from 1 to 8 is 36. The sum of the numbers from 1 to 36 is 666. One of the Egyptian temples used as an observatory was the Temple of Dendera, which, although dedicated to Hathor, was said to be the birthplace of Isis. The Dendera temple had in one room a magnificent zodiac carved in the roof, and it is of interest to us that its axis was at approximately 18 degrees pentagonal to the walls of the temple. The symbolic period of a woman's pregnancy was 9 months and therefore 270 days. Regarding the myth of Isis's husband Osiris and his dismemberment by Set into 14 parts with a missing 15th of his phallus, Consider that the circumference of a circle can be divided into 15 equal portions, which will then generate a pentagonal figure with one star point outside the circle, but still produce 36 degrees on all 5 points. By allocating a diameter of 360 units, the identity of a circle, and using the biblical value of pi equals 3, the circumference becomes 1080. Divide this by 15 and the answer is 72, the base angle of a pentagram. In the bisectors of the points is exhibited the active principle of the goddess Isis, the number 18. If 36 is regarded as the numerical equivalent of 360 degrees, the 5 star points of 36 degrees give us 180, the number of degrees in a triangle or pyramid, and 180 displays the 18 of Isis and the 0 of her mother Nut, the starry night sky as seen from Earth. Consider in relation to this that the Hebrew word for 5 is he, symbolized by the womb. Hydrogen, the elementary or simplest form of matter, is composed only of 2 opposites, 1 proton and 1 electron. It is the reference standard of matter and has a molar mass of 1.008. It is the fuel of the sun and the stars, the primordial matter of the cosmos. It unites with oxygen, the element of Isis, having 18 as its atomic number, to form water. 81 is the reflection of the active principle of Isis, a number which establishes the law and order of the origin of numbers. It acts upon the cardinal points of the circular compass, representing space, to produce the building blocks of the language of the gods. The significance of this to the people who devised it is obvious, particularly that of the last expression. This system will not produce 9, which signifies death. 180 is the active principle of Isis, 18, born out of her mother Nut, 0, forming the radius of the circle of perfection. It is the union of the seed or center with the circumference. It represents the epitome of the understanding of all things within the circumference, which is the abyss. We must remember that the symbolic or occult value of pi is 3, and the symbolic circumference must therefore be 2 pi r equals 1080. The circumference 1080 divided by 18 and 15 produces 60 and 72 respectively. The product of 60 and 72 is 4,320. This number divided by 666 is the emphasized numerical value of the squared hypotenuse of the isosceles triangle of Isis, a triangle with equal sides of 18 enclosing the right angle, hence 2 times 18 squared. The unit of measurement called the cubit is closely related to the English inch by virtue of their common Celtic origin. The length of this standard is 18 inches when used for occult symbolism. We are told in the biblical book of Kings, chapter 7, verse 15, of the pillars of the priestess card, Jachin and Boaz, cast by Hiram Abif and since associated with Freemasonry. Quote, "For he cast 2 pillars of brass of 18 cubits high apiece, and a line of 12 cubits did compass either of them about." End quote. Together, the 18-cubit pillars reveal the 36 identity of the pentagram or circle. The circumference of 12 cubits or 216 inches produces a diameter of 72 inches when using the symbolic pi equals 3. As 72 degrees is the base angle of the pentagram and the radius would be 36, again we appear to be confirming femininity. The Book of Kings is full of dimensions which become understandable when the 18 factor is applied, particularly when examining perimeters. The temple dimensions of 60 by 20 by 30 cubits seem to be meaningless, but converted to inches they become 1080 by 360 by 540, all strictly in accordance with the female imagery. In Kings 8, verse 2, we are given the dimensions of Solomon's house as 100 by 50 by 30 cubits, and apart from their obvious sum of 180, the total length of the edges is 720, pentagonal again. Having calculated the total perimeter or edge length of a given structure, remember the temple rule that all square constructions must contain circular measure in order to be considered holy. The biblical ark was not really a lid, but a seat. Considering that the measure of all ancient masons or carpenters was 1 cubit equals 18 inches, the perimeter measures can be seen. 4 lengths of 45 equals 180 Isis. 4 lengths of 27 equals 108 Isis. 4 lengths of 18 equals 72 base angle of the female pentagram. And the total is 360, the circle. The book of Exodus, chapter 25, verse 23, tells us, quote, "Thou shalt also make a table of shittim wood. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof, and a cubit and half the length thereof." End quote. Using our 18-inch cubit, the dimensions become 36 by 18 by 27. The total perimeter measure is therefore 4 by 36 equals 144, pentagonal. 4 by 18 equals 72, again pentagonal. And 4 by 27 equals 108, Isis and Nuit. These totals unite to become 324, which happens to be 18 squared. Now, let's add the total perimeter of these 3 items. The ark, 396, plus the mercy seat, 360, plus the shoe bread table, 324, equals 1080. The Temple of Solomon and everything it contains is controlled by numerical values associated with sexual doctrine, but always with the female dominant. Furthermore, it establishes that 18 inches is the value of the cubit required to read the secrets. The more one analyzes the values generated by this key, the more one realizes that the English or Celtic inch was used to relate cyclic motion to pentagonal geometry. The ultimate secret lies in the circle, the female generative organ, the womb. A 360-degree circle split down the center evenly gives 2 180-degree halves. It is the division of the priestess in sacred number. 108 appears frequently with its multiples in the sacred books of the Hindu Vedas. The Upanishad is comprised of 108 books. The Shiva chantings and Mahamrityunjay mantras are intoned 108 times. In fact, the Vedas can be seen as the book in the priestess's lap, the Torah, being that the word Veda means teaching. So too, does the Old Norse word Eda. Hertha von Deschen and Giorgio de Santillana, the authors of Hamlet's Mill, have this to say, quote, "But it goes back to the basic figure 10,800, the number of stanzas in the Rig Veda, 40 syllables to a stanza, which, together with 108, occurs insistently in Indian tradition. 10,800 is also the number which has been given by Heraclitus for the duration of the Aeon, according to Censorinus, Natali 18. 10,800 is the number of bricks of the Indian fire altar Agnikayana." End quote. The same authors tell us also about 5 in relation to 108 being evident in Cambodia's ancient temple complex of Angkor Wat. Quote, "It has 5 gates, and to each of them leads a road, bridging over that water ditch which surrounds the whole place. Each of these roads is bordered by a row of huge stone figures, 108 per avenue, 54 on each side, altogether 540 statues of Deva and Asura, and each row carries a huge Naga serpent with 9 heads." End quote. To see the relationship of 54 and 540 to our Isis number, simply consider that 108 times 5 is 540. Our opposite and yet twin pillars of Yakim and Boaz, between which sits Tarot's priestess and goddess, are the pillars of Hercules, as well as the Gemini twins leading to the sign of Cancer, represented in the top vertical line of the tarot wheel. In Canaanite lore, Sharu was the pillar of dawn and Shalmu was the pillar of sunset. These pillars are of the same principles, and the 2 S's of their names can be seen as the 2 in the name of Isis. 360 is the number of both square and circle, and the 3 angles of a triangle or pyramid always add up to 180 degrees. In the Great Pyramid of Giza, the passage to the Queen's Chamber ascends to 180 feet and divides into 2 branches. The first ark, as in a boat, was built by Utnapishtim in Sumerian myth, measuring 60 by 60 by 60, which totals 180, and represents the sexagesimal system where 60 is written as 1. The numeric value of the Kabbalistic logos is 1080, which is the number of miles in the radius of the moon, and also the numerical equivalent of the Greek term to Pneuma Hagion, meaning Holy Ghost. Da'at, the hidden 11th Sephirotic sphere on the Tree of Life, has a numerical value of 474. The site of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem rests upon a point called Da'at. It is the place marked by the head of microcosmos, which affords a reason for calling the place Golgotha, the skull. In 3 hollow places of the skull, the brain is contained. In the 3rd cavity, Da'at, or knowledge, is contained. By gematria, Golgotha is equivalent to Da'at, thusly. It is explained by Porphyry in his Cave of the Nymphs that souls descending in generation enter through the gate of Cancer, the northern tropic, on their way to an earthly body, and on their release at death, they ascend through Capricorn, the southern tropic, on their way back to heaven. According to Vitruvius, regarding classical temple design, the Ionic column was made according to the proportion of a woman with a height 8 times that of its width. The invention of the Ionic column is ascribed by Vitruvius to the Asiatic colony of 13 cities founded by Ion, the son of Xuthos and Creusa. When the Ionians were about to build a temple to Artemis and seeking a new proportion, they used the female figure as the standard. Modern philologists have frequently derived the word Ionic from the Oriental Ioni, whose symbol is the vesica. The Ionic was the most ancient form of Greek philosophy and was introduced by Thales, celebrated for his observations of the Lesser Bear, or Ursa Minor. A rhombus, the Ionic symbol, is the height of a cross whose extreme measure is 1080, the number of miles in the moon's radius, and the numerical value of the Holy Ghost. The design of the Ionic column is primarily distinguished by its double character, marked by the 2 spiral volutes of its capital. The internal measures of the Temple of Solomon are just double those of the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies being 20 cubits or 360 inches square with a perimeter of 1,440 inches, while the holy place is 720 by 360 inches, having a perimeter of 2,160, the number of miles in the moon's diameter, its width being 20 cubits. It just contains the sun's orbit, taking the sun's distance at 10, and its diagonal is 63 1/3 cubits, which is nearly the circumference of the sun's orbit. The rhombus, which contains the Holy of Holies and holy place, has a perimeter of the diameter of the sun's orbit. The measures of the porch are 180 by 360 inches, which gives a perimeter of 1,080, the number of miles in the moon's radius. The internal length of the temple from east to west, including the porch, is 76 cubits or 1,368 inches, and 144 times 9.5 equals 1,368, and a vesica 1,368 broad is 2,368 long. The perimeter of the temple externally is 471 feet, or the diameter of a circle having a circumference of 1,480, which is the numerical value of the word Christos, related, of course, to the word Christ, and Krishna or Christna. And its length externally from east to west is 98 cubits, which is about the radius of Saturn's orbit, if the sun's distance be taken at 10. The width of 2 intersecting circles forming a vesica 98 broad is 294, the number of the name, Ecclesia, the church. The width of the front is 59 cubits, or 88 feet, or 1,062 inches, and 88 is the amount of the sun's declination in the ecliptic, measured by its own diameter. The length from the outside of the eastern wall to the outside of the western wall of the Holy of Holies is 88 cubits. 88 also represents the amount of days in the orbit of Mercury around the Sun. The external width of the cell is 576 inches, the width, including the side chambers, being 756 inches, the height of the cross, whose extreme length is 1,080. The 2 pillars, Jachin and Boaz, in the porch of Solomon's temple were supposed to exemplify the Hebrew proportions of columns. The position of these pillars decides their primary significance. They flank the two chambers on either side of the porch and are intended to symbolize the double portion of the triad, represented by the whole temple. Their names, strength and stability, are analogous to the names of the two beings, Kratos and Bia, who appear in the play of Aeschylus as the male and female powers who bind or crucify Prometheus. They represent the twofold element of creation. Isis means throne, and the throne is depicted in her headdress. The figure of the number 8 as we see it today is the letter S overlaid upon its reflection. Relative to the name of Isis, that doubled S is combined with the straight line of the letter I, which is, when spoken, breath or air. The combined figure is also the staff of Hermes, a common medical symbol today, a symbol with roots in the medicine of the Great Mother. The name of Isis is embedded in the instrument called the sistrum, which, when shaken, produces a sound replicating the hissing of a serpent and symbolically stirs up stagnant water. Her name is also resonant in our modern word sister, echoing the relationship between Isis and her own sister, Nephthys, who can be seen as her own shadow self. Her active principle can be seen in the sine wave, a diagram of the sun in its ecliptic from the Tropic of Capricorn to the Tropic of Cancer, which shows an S upon the eye of the equator. All things considered, and returning to numbers in tarot, the priestess's number 2 plus the Hierophant's number 5 equals the chariot's number 7. The chariot is, of course, ruled by Cancer and the moon. The priestess's number 2 plus the fool's number 0 equals 2, or negation of the fool's original nature, and sublimation into the priestess, sexual knowledge, and the great universal mother who bore him. Another answer to this 2 plus 0 can be given not considering the values of the numbers, but by retaining the fool's 0 beside the priestess, which gives 20, the number of the card of judgment, also to be considered as rebirth. This is the number of another goddess, Demeter or Demeter, and her name gives us another modern word relative to mathematics and geometry, diameter.